Hello, my name is Chris Hyde, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Corporal Denali Thompson. And we're both with the Wyoming Guard here in beautiful Cheyenne, Wyoming. I'd like to welcome you to Unfiltered Voices. So our intent with this podcast will always be to provide a transparent look at compelling topics across the Wyoming National Guard and really the military at large. We're interested in frank discussion, and we will absolutely never shy away from a controversial topic or a line of thought. And you'll likely see a bit of that today and in future broadcasts. So today we're here to talk about the Army Combat Fitness Test, or the ACFT, if you're a big acronym fan. And we're joined with our two guests, Sergeant First Class David Pulsifer and Staff Sergeant Leah Urquhart. Do you guys want to introduce yourself, say a few words at the beginning? Over to you.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sergeant First Class David Pulsifer. I've been in a little over 17 years now in the Army National Guard. Started out as an engineer into field artillery and then the recruiting and retention battalion. I became a drill sergeant back in 2018 as well to help with our RSP soldiers recruit sustainment program. And now I'm the battalion operations NCO.
All right, thanks, David. Leah?
Staff Sergeant Leah Urquhart. I'm with Training Center Command right now, the fire section. I'm currently the fire chief over there. I work full-time at the Air Guard Fire Department as well. Outside of that, part-time I do personal training here and there, help out people get into physical fitness and hoping to expand that into the board and stuff. But yeah, very high physically demanding jobs that I do in the military and then the civilian side. So.
Awesome. Okay. Good stuff. So, all right. So the way this format will work for you guys is we'll ask a question and then encourage discussion with that question. And then when we get to the point where we kind of feel like we've exhausted that topic a little bit, we'll move on to another question. So I'll be the first one to throw one out there. Okay. So why do you think that the Army kept the 2-mile run in the ACFT? And do you think it's necessary, maybe even critical? Why or why not? Either one of you.
No, I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
So, Army got away from the old physical fitness tests and went to an Army combat fitness test. At no point in combat am I going to be dressed in PTs running around a track. However, I do think having a 5-mile ruck or a 1-mile ruck run would be more intertwined with what they're trying to obtain with the Army Combat Fitness Test, making it more combat-like. There's a couple other workouts that I may disagree with would change, but specifically on the 2-mile run, I do think it's important to test cardiovascular fitness and endurance. However, there's a different way to do it in order to meet the intent of Army Combat Fitness Test.
Okay. Leah?
I agree completely. I think that being wise with your words and what you're kind of labeling things is super specific when it comes to fitness because, like you said, doing the combat fitness test, you think pretty much kind of what it is besides, I think, the run. You're doing things that kind of reflect what you're going to be doing on the battlefield or out when you're deployed and stuff like that. But then when you're doing a 2-mile run, like, in my opinion, I think if you're running, it's oh shit situation and you're running. Like to train for that, I think for combat, I think a 2-mile ruck or maybe even longer than that, 3 or 4, is a lot more reflective onto the combat fitness test, what they're trying to show. And I think that there should be still a fitness test to like initially when you get in. I don't know, is there a separate PT test that you take for RSP when you first
occupational physical assessment
okay.
test? Yeah. It kind of falls in that same category. I don't necessarily agree with it. It's MOS based, which I don't agree with anything on MOS based, and we could get into that later. It's we're a soldier first, right? So I think it needs to be a set standard across the board and take MOS out of your physical capabilities as a soldier. But yes, there is that separate test to get them shipped to training.
Gotcha, yeah. Yeah, so I think that there's, like you said as well, I think some sort of cardiovascular endurance test, but I don't think that the 2-mile run specifically is, if we're going to stay with the combat fitness test as our primary test. I don't think that that's the best cardiovascular endurance test.
Okay, so you would say that it doesn't really, if you're doing a combat fitness test, that doing just a run is not necessarily something that would equate to, like all the other events have got some sort of, they equal to something you might do as a soldier, but you're not necessarily just going to go run around track, to your point.
Yeah.
So that's more your argument.
And I hate running, but that's not why I'm getting. That's not why I'm getting at it.
Okay.
Why I'm getting at the point of getting away from the run. I just want it to lean more towards the end goal that they're trying to obtain of making more combat ready soldiers, and that just doesn't do it.
I mean, I'm an old guy. I grew up with the PT test where it was the run, the push-ups and stuff, right? So like, and I was a running fool, right? Like I loved running, and that was my big thing. So for me, yeah, I guess I can't think of a PT test that doesn't have a run.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is a running event in the PT, in the ACFT, which would be the sprint track carry.
Yep.
Would that be enough to have just that as the cardiovascular sort of event in the ACFT? And just get away with a run, period? Or do you think there should still be some sort of cardiovascular part to it?
I think that would be enough. I know that they're looking into 2025, changing all of the times and making it male, female, and having age categories set in place. I do think that is smart, but make it a more, not obtainable, because we're supposed to set ourselves apart from civilians. However, there is a way to test it, I think, with the sprint jag carry specifically.
Okay.
So do you think there should be a standard across the board for male and female? Like, do you think it should be the same no matter what, or do you think they should still have the separate standards?
They could have separate standards on cardiovascular, testing and fitness capabilities. They can have separate standards, but don't make it so easily obtainable. Like I said, we're setting ourselves apart from civilians. Like, it's a very particular group of individuals that want to join the military anyway. Right. So show that throughout your career.
Okay, so standards still. Are you saying that just for the running event, or are you saying that across the board with all the different events? We're specifically talking about the run, or we're talking about the cardiovascular event, or
cardiovascular in general. Every event should have its own standard for male, female. I don't believe it should be separated by MOS though, and I know that's what they're looking into.
Okay, because I'm going to go there. That is one of the questions I want to ask. Because that's been kind of one of for the old guy. That is one of the things that I think has been, should there be different standards depending on the job that you do? If you're a desk jockey, do you have a less standard than if you're an infantryman?
No.
Okay.
No.
Then why?
Like I said, it's simple. We're a soldier first, and that needs to be our main priority. If we want to be an excelling fighting force, I can't base it off of my AGR job where I'm at my desk most of the time, because if I get deployed, they just gave me 45 minutes to do a 2-mile run because I have a desk job. That doesn't make any sense to me. It needs to be a set standard for soldiers.
Okay.
I agree with that completely. I think that the PT test itself, the ACFT, should be one standard across the board for your soldier, because again, we're soldiers first. Preach that day and night. But then I do think that there should be a separate test for MOS specific jobs outside of that. Because like for firefighters, you have to have different standards, and it's through regulation too, that you have to get separate physicals and you have to meet a physical expectation for that job, and that doesn't necessarily reflect in the ACFT. So I think that if you, like for firefighters, I don't know about other MOSs, maybe like 13 Bravo or something like that, make a PT test that's specific to make sure you can perform that job to those standards. But still, no questions asked, you still have to pass the ACFT. That's priority number one, because you're a soldier.
So okay, if I'm hearing you right, then you're saying, I think both of you are saying, that there would be a block of events that would be everybody's event, and then say for firefighting or something, there might be a certain skill that you need to have, that you're going to need to be able to do for the job that you've got. where there would be a way of testing that to make sure that you meet that.
Yeah, and,
So-
and it's not incorporated with the ACFT whatsoever. They're
Okay.
two separate things. So,
Like at a unit level even?
yeah, unit
Yeah.
level, your section levels, because TCC as a whole doesn't need to do the firefighter fitness test, but that section specifically, I think, then go and perform. And we can even steal, the civilian side has a few great tests. We can just steal that and then use that. But I think even for other jobs at unit levels, constantly testing your ability to physically do your job, I think, for the physical MOSs. I mean, there's lots of different jobs, but so I think that comes down to what your section or unit specifically requires.
But would you want to make that, I'm going to follow that thread a little bit, would you want to make that a responsibility of the individual unit to develop something like that? Or do you think that, say, the artillery school should come up with things that are artillery specific, that an artillery battery soldier should be able to do, and they would standardize that? I guess it's a standardization question, right? Like, do you make that a standard across the force, or do you issue guidance to specific units and say, you need to develop something to make sure that you are capable of doing whatever skill set you need for that unit?
No. No, you can't do that.
Okay.
And,
all right.
and this is going to piss a lot of people off that watch it. But you cannot trust these units to do that. They won't do it. It has to be a standard coming from higher.
Okay.
If it's delegated down to the unit level of, hey, come up with this MOS specific training, physical fitness test, whatever you want to name it, it's not going to happen. Or if it does happen, it's going to be very basic, easy to pass stuff that anybody working at McDonald's can pass.
Okay. So you're in favor of standardization regardless?
Yes,
Okay.
coming from higher. And it sets a standard Army-wide, because we're not just the Wyoming Army National Guard. If you scope out a little bit, it's the Army. We need to set a standard, and it needs to be the same across the board for those individuals. Say
Okay.
they IST, if they go to another state and everything changes, they're like, what the hell's going on?
Okay. Makes sense.
I agree.
Yeah.
Next question is, do you think the ACFT is discriminatory towards women? Specifically, I know we have two different standards, and personally, I don't think that it is, because there is two different standards. But do you think in certain aspects, like if someone gets pregnant or they have like that longer period of time before they can come back, what are your thoughts on?
I think it is discriminatory against women because we're held at a lower standard. I think that we should be held at the same standard. I think that doesn't matter male or female. I think that's where they kind of went into trying to make it job specific, so that you could take out the male female and then it was based off of your job, which, and I think we kind of talked about, that doesn't really make sense or work entirely. But within when you calculate your scores, right, there's a minimum and there's a maximum. So you have a wide range that you can fall in between. But I pretty just stay in that. Again, like I said, I'm a firefighter. I have to be able to pull somebody out that weighs 250 pounds the same way they're expected to pull me out.
Okay.
So that basic level of, hey, I'm going into combat with you. You have to trust me the way that I trust you. And it's a little unfair if I am at a lower standard than he is. Now, I think, based off of that, I think the military as a whole has failed preparing soldiers because they have kind of like held the hand and kind of called it a little bit like, hey, you can be at a little bit of a lower standard. I hold myself to such a high expectation. I want to be up there. I look at the male PT score when I'm doing my PT test. I want to shoot for higher. But I think that what comes with that is you have to help guide and make sure that everybody, male and female, is getting the same level of care and learning how to take that PT test, how to prepare for it. I mean, we talk about, we go through Army PT and you get into formation and you go through just super basic things to check a box or whatever, but taking soldiers out actually into the gym and teaching a proper form for deadlifting and for building a workout routine, things like that actually putting in the care to help soldiers be better, rather than just, hey, here's a PT test, you're expected to pass this at this level. I think we need to take better care of soldiers to pass it, so everyone can pass at the same level. That way, we're all like, I'm going to go in with anybody, I can get put in there with anybody, and we're both going to have the same level of physical fitness, of mental. Like, everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses, and you've got to kind of play into that. But I think that as long as physically you're hitting the same level, at least at the minimum, then you can get rid of that, and then you can focus on more of the mental stuff. So that's kind of. Sorry, I went on a.
No, that's excellent. I mean, you keyed on something that I've thought that is, I think, is a pro for the ACFT that in my career I don't think I would have ever come around to saying this, and that is that, 20 years ago, it was all about being able to do the amount of push-ups, being able to do the amount of sit-ups, being able to do the run. But then all the other physical training that you could do really didn't matter to that. That the argument was that you could be, going on a rock or something like that, and that would have nothing to do with your ability to do the run. Or if you're practicing on weights and you're doing weight training, weight training really necessarily wouldn't directly connect to your ability to do push-ups. What you really need to do is go in and do a lot of push-ups to make sure you can practice your push-ups. And I think that the new ACFT, can't talk, too much coffee, basically encourages people to go to the gym or work out in different ways that they wouldn't have done back when I first came into the military.
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, really, as an officer in the military, it was all about making that run, and officers ran all the time. And it was just kind of like some weird acknowledged fact that when I was the captain, I needed to be able to run. Now, push-ups and sit-ups were important, but I needed to be able to run because officers run. And it really didn't facilitate my desire to go and do weight training, And so as a result, jumping forward to the ACFT, I think it's really been good at encouraging a lot of different types of activity that you would need to do, which is the reason why it's the combat fitness test, supposed to make sure that you're ready. And having been to combat a few times, I still remember doing run, push-ups, sit-ups when I was in the desert, and that was the important thing. Even though most of the time, in Afghanistan particularly, the air was toxic. I really didn't want to go run outside. I was in Kabul, and I think at the time had the worst air quality in the world after Delhi in India. So, it was bad. People had black lung running. So I would do a lot of gym time, and then they would want me to go do PT tests outside. It would freak me out.
Yeah.
So, I agree with you. I do think that it's facilitated that. But I'm curious, David, what do you think? Is it discriminatory, or is
I
it?
identify as a male. I don't make sure I don't. Okay, I just cover it there. No,
Okay,
I agree with her. It goes back to what I said on the previous question. Is we're all a soldier first. I think that's. I'm not going to elaborate even too much on that. I think it's simply put that way. So I agree with what you're saying. Is I want to be able to go to combat with male, female, and I don't know if trust is the right word, but I'll use it. Trust, for lack of a better phrase, them just as much as I would anybody else.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, I would agree. The best combat medic I ever saw was the combat medic for my brigade commander when I was in Iraq. And she was a grandma. She was African American. She had grandkids. She decided in her 40s to join the Army. And my brigade commander trusted her with his life, literally, right? So, I mean, but nobody would ever say that she wasn't physically capable of doing the job. To your point, she could pull somebody out of a vehicle. She would. So, yeah, I would agree. I do like the idea of being sort of gender blind when it comes to looking at the PT test and trying to make sure that everybody keeps at the same standard.
Yeah. And not be so ignorant of it. Like, there's situations with pregnancy. And I think that you have to adapt and you have to be aware of that. But humans are very adaptable. So if you start lowering the standard, then the organization is gonna conform to what that standard is. Sure. So you're opening the doors and allowing for that. And and generally as humans, we like to be held accountable. It's hard to hold yourself accountable. So if you have an organization that has these standards and expectations, you're going to be more inclined to follow those than to know, like, oh, I can get away with not running as fast this time, you know?
Right, sure.
So just knowing that the higher we set our standards and expectations, like, people will follow. People will start to, especially with some sort of incentive, you know, people are gonna start to strive to do better. We, again, have to, as an organization, support that and make sure that we're helping each other out to get into the gym and to do better. So.
How do you think as an organization we go across, like, trying to teach people how to lift in the gym? Because, I mean, obviously, like at drill, you only have so much time. They give you, the hour of PT in the morning where you go do PRT, which is so silly.
Yeah.
And then go, I don't know, play volleyball or dodgeball.
Yeah.
Nothing that really supports that ACFT or, like, gives time for the ACFT to really be, like, taught or, like, how to work out and how to do those things. So how do you think as an organization we move forward to get to a point where, like, okay, now we're not only supporting our soldiers, but we're also putting them in a position where they can succeed successfully because they know exactly how to do it. They know how to lift weights. They know proper form.
Yeah, I think, like I said before, I think that Army PRT is just kind of like a check the box, which teaches you to still fall back onto your soldier skills of getting information and, you know, obeying orders and things like that. And I think that's important, but when you're talking about PT, that needs to be reflective onto showing your soldiers how to just be better physically fit. And then that will also reflect onto the PT test. So for your PT, nobody's going to get in shape over a weekend. I think that should be used as time to guide them on what to do for the rest of that month or the rest of the next 2 months until the next drill. So then you set up, every unit should have an MFT, I believe. I think that MFT should organize, hey, we're going to sit down and we're going to build this workout plan to reflect over the next few months to get you prepared for the PRT or the ACFT. So you'll do deadlifts one, and then you'll do hand release push-ups, and that's just practicing them, and then the people who are good at it help people that aren't. And then I think that we should advocate for people who are struggling to speak up, like reach out to your MFTs, reach out to people in your unit that are more physically fit and have experience. And I think that those of us that are better should be willing to sit down with soldiers and put together a workout routine. I think that just as an organization, we can take care of each other better that way. So
I'm interested in your thoughts. All right, so I have been in multiple units where it was prohibited, discouraged and prohibited to do anything other than the types of physical activity and training that you should do for the test. In other words, getting together at the gym and playing a game of basketball was absolutely verboten, right? Like, I mean, I've been in units where that, and then I went and served with the Brits for a little while in NATO, and they would in the afternoon go play soccer for an hour and a half or whatever, and they were brutal.
Yeah.
And their perspective was it was less about doing specifically targeted exercises and isometric, all of that. It was about the team building, the camaraderie, the fact that you're doing something physically demanded, but you're doing it together. It was like another way to exercise so that it wasn't just, I'm going to go get on the gym. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to get on the machine and do, 15 reps of whatever, right? Like, it was because that's going to feed into the test. So I guess the question is, should it be more about being physically able to do the job and less about doing certain events, or which comes first, right? Like, if you're doing something very, very demanding physically, that's a team building thing, is that just as good at doing rope swings and all the other, exercises that you need to do in order to throw the medicine ball X amount of, meters? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that's good in sections for team building and morale if they were going to do something together. But mm-hmm. to kind of fall back a little bit on what you guys were just talking about is we've already been given the standard by Big Army. We know what that is. It's our job as officers senior NCOs, junior NCOs, whatever it is, to push that down to our Joes of the information. Though the information is out there for everybody, we're still counseling them on the standard to set that, just that initial counseling or developmental counseling.
How often do you really think that happens, though? Like initial counseling, developmental counseling. Like I could argue that it never happens.
You're 100% right. It doesn't happen. However, we can't fix that, and I'm not going to get off onto a different topic there. That's a whole other issue.
That's a whole other issue.
But I agree with you, and it does need to happen, and I think that's the NCO's responsibility. Mm-hmm. But it does go hand in hand with that question of PT is how long does all the NCOs need to take their time to hold the hand of every soldier?
Okay.
And more talking about M-Day soldiers specifically, and nothing against them having balancing civilian life and military life. It's not easy. However, the standard. If you want to be in this organization, you take the time and learn it. If you're using your weekend to get with your NCOs, we all have time on their drill weekends for hip pocket training or whatever they call it now. For that training, you could go to a gym. Every armory has a gym, and you can go through the movements. But that 28 days between drill, roughly, that we have, why are you not doing it yourself? That needs to be it. You need to be a self-starter to be in the Department of Defense, period.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, because you're not always going to have somebody there to hold your hand, I think. Yeah, there's a level of self-accountability and discipline that you have to have. And that's for anything, especially expected out of being in the military. Like you go through basic training and you learn the basics of being an adult. I think most people in the military grow up faster than people outside the military. So there's that level of discipline and self-accountability that's instilled in you at a young age or at an early time in your life, typically. And I think that's kind of lost and forgotten. And I think it is huge, and that's 90% of what needs to be done to pass that PT test is you have to take that self-accountability and do it on your own time. So I do think that like you doing basketball and volleyball, those morale building events, I think that's important, but it doesn't come before PT. I think that it can go hand in hand, but it can also be very separate. I think that you can still find ways to put together a good PT hour or so where, like, you can incorporate some fun things like that, or make it a competition, or little things like that. But there's plenty of time, I think, outside of PT hours, because every unit should have like a specific time period that when they're on drill, or typically does, to conduct PT. I think, and then outside of that, like you said, everyone's got some level of time. Even if it's 30 minutes, you can take 30 minutes and go do some sort of morale building event. And sports are a great way to do that. It's a fantastic way to do that, and it helps you physically too. So I think
you never walk into a drill weekend and not see soldiers leaning up against the wall on their cell phones. My point is, they have the time.
They have the time. I mean, but do you think that it is inherently more difficult in the Guard, if you're an M-Day cycle person, do you think that, okay, as leadership, would it be more difficult for you to make sure that your soldiers are staying in shape, knowing that they have got these huge amounts? Yeah. I mean, my first duty station was Fort Bragg, now Liberty, and we ran every day. Mm-hmm. And it was aggressive PT. I was in an infantry battalion, and it was always going to be aggressive PT. And I think there was a perception that if you were in the Guard or Reserve, that you were not going to be at the same standard physically. So I guess knowing that, and that was just a prejudice on the side of the active duty guy. Mm-hmm. How do you get around that? You know, how do you, as a National Guard leader, make sure that your soldiers who you don't see every day of the week, who have got civilian professions and doing things like that, how do you make sure that they stay to that standard? Now that the ACFT is a new thing, it's there, it's going to be around. how do you get after that? Because I think I agree with you. I think there would be there's a lot of time, and it should be your responsibility. It's the responsibility of everybody in the military to make the standard. But saying that acknowledging that is the expectation, and then the reality of that expectation, I think are two completely different things.
Yeah.
So, with what you said, how do you get after that?
It's just caring about your soldiers,
Yeah.
getting to know them individually. Because, active duty. Why do you think most of them do it? Because they're told to. Your information at this time when we're starting PT,
Right.
you don't have that here because they're at their civilian job.
Okay.
If you're touching base with them, do you know that they're actually doing it? No, but the test will tell you. The test will tell you if they're doing it.
Sure.
If there's any improvement and you're actually keeping record. But touching base with your soldiers and caring, and then of course back to counselings and going over the standard and expectations. But also, I'll just hit on it because I know that's not a topic we're at. But also recognizing improvements and
Okay.
awarding that, rather than we're going to have a sit down when you're fucking up. And that seems to be a standard right now. So when they're improving on the ACFT as well, acknowledge that, because then they're going to be like, I want to do better.
Yeah. Okay. Positive reinforcement rather than always relying on the negative reinforcement if you didn't make the standard. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
No, I'm big on that too. Okay. All right. I'm going to go down a completely controversial one. But it kind of it things that I'm the old guy here, so I'm gonna ask this question: is the ACFT discriminatory towards older soldiers? Is it ageist? I've had plenty of discussions with very old command sergeant majors that have irritated. I don't know. Is it? I don't know. I mean, do you think by having I guess the question worded a different way is, with the standards that were applied early on, and that have evolved with the course of the evolution of the ACFT, do you think it is more difficult, like if you have the same standard for everybody, regardless of age, is it going to be more difficult for that 48, 50-year-old person, 54, to be able to pass the test, vice the 22-year-old person that is way younger and just got less knee problems, I'm just curious.
Yeah,
thoughts.
not always, because see a tactfully professional way to put this.
I don't know.
I've seen some older gentlemen, and that's not ageist, do way better than some of the younger soldiers.
Okay.
I don't think it's discriminatory at all. And I think that's also goes in line. I know that there's different reasons for it, but why they have alternate events as well.
Okay.
There's on FU1, the gym, I've gone there to work out a few times. There's an older gentleman, I don't know his age exactly. He's got to be 60s, 70s, retired, whatever, full gray hair. Watched him deadlift 600 pounds.
Okay.
Like, just pull 600 pounds easy. So I think that kind of goes back onto it's the level of discipline that you have and your mindset and how much you're willing to do, because I think we're talking a lot about the standards for the military and what physical fitness means to that, but we also need to talk about how that reflects on your entire life. The more physically fit you are, it's no questions asked, you're going to live longer and better, a healthier life.
Sure.
The more that you invest into taking care of yourself, drinking water, eating high proteins, fats, and maintaining how much you're eating, what you're eating, and then physically what you're doing and how you're performing, that's going to reflect on your entire life, and it's going to help you be physically fit to continue to do those things longer in life. I think there's outside circumstances like anything else, like injuries that happen. Not everybody's going to be in the exact same boat, but when injuries like that happen, you have to, you go through you get a profile, and then you're like, okay, you can take it a little slower, give you that time to rehabilitate yourself back to where you need to be as a soldier. And I think sometimes hands are held a little too long for those things, or a little too much. I think I've seen people bounce back from injuries faster than doctors even expect to happen, and that's because those people are putting in that work and that effort because they want to be better. They want to go back and be able to perform it the same way that they were. So I think it all depends on your mindset, and I think that if you want to be 40, 50 years old and you want to be able to do those things, you can. You just have to put in the work. You're not going to be able to perform like you did when you were 20, most likely. But there are people out there that are in their 50s and 60s performing better than they were 20 because they decided to make that lifestyle change later in their life, and now they're in a better condition. So I think that one is really hard, and I don't know exactly what my opinion is other than I think going back to your soldier first, I think take care of yourself and work towards being better and living a longer, healthier life, and it'll show. Like I said, there's a wide range. There's still a minimum, and it's not the hardest score to meet. It's gonna suck if you're one of those people that wants to get the highest score, and you're driven and passionate about it. But you do have to accept that at a certain age, you are gonna get probably a little bit of a lower score, but you're still in that gap,
Sure.
So do you think your score should reflect, as you get older, your scores get a little bit longer, your run time gets longer, you can throw less or whatever. Do you think that score should still reflect, as you get older, there's less of a standard to meet?
I guess I don't really know.
When you're taking your PT test, if you're anywhere from 20 years old to 25-year-old, there's a certain standard. But if you're 30 to 50, there's a different standard. Do you think that standard should be the same all the way across the board, from 20 to 50? Or do you think as you get older, that standard should change slightly to meet the conditions of just getting older?
Slightly is the key word. I don't think any drastic changes are necessary, but I could see a slight change as you increase in age. But like I said, they have those alternate events, and people do bounce back. And then there's also, what kind of heart does a soldier have as well, and what are they going to put in? I mean, our last ACFT, I saw my first line of the year, First Sergeant Fagler. He, not very long ago, got done with complete ACL replacement and all sorts. He's had 3 surgeries on his leg, and though he knew he couldn't do everything, and everyone was aware of that, he still tried, and I saw him limping backwards to drag the sled across the ground after having knee surgery. So It's also, there's heart that goes into it as well.
Yeah.
I think the ACFT pulls that out of you too,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's important to know and to see in your soldiers, because again, if you go down range and seeing that heart in soldiers is, I think, really what is important to see out of those, because you can push your body past limits. That it's your mind that holds you back most of the time. So your body can go beyond limits. Then so it's that heart that drives that. And so that's also.
Well, I think what I've noticed through my career is that because the ACFT came so late in my career, really at my 25-year mark, right? And now that we're having this discussion and sort of being retrospective about it, I feel like that the PT test that I grew up in the Army with, was you had your priority. Everybody had their event that they were good at. Some people were really good. They were really into weight training, and they were good at push-ups. Some people were terrific at sit-ups. Sit-ups and run were my big events. I could easily do over 100 sit-ups in 2 minutes, right? That was my thing. But it did not encourage me. It didn't force me to be more broad in how I was working out. And so I guess now looking back at it and listening to both of you talk about it, I think that was my gripe going into the ACFT was I don't want to do a deadlift, because I don't do weight training. I'm not into that. I'm not into weights. It's not something I'm into. But now that it's an event that's there, that is something that you do have to do. So I would argue it does make you more well-rounded. Whereas I think that, if I was in combat and I needed to run really fast and Forrest Gump it, I was good, But if I had to Forrest Gump it and wear 100 pounds of body armor, I was not going to do good because we weren't doing the 2-mile run with an IOTV vest, right? So, so then the weight training thing really became, and you had all kinds of back injuries that were coming out OEF, OAF when we were over there. So looking back on it now, I think that the ACFT, had it been implemented or something like that had been implemented way earlier, it might have actually helped with a lot of the injuries that were coming out of the counterinsurgency fight, where all of a sudden, when I joined the military, it was light infantry training. You wore just very little, there was no body armor. You had just a load-bearing equipment or whatever you had. You had canteens and stuff like that. It didn't require a lot of upper body strength, in other words, right? Unless you were doing something specifically, handling artillery shells or whatever. But now looking back at it, yeah, I went to the desert in 2008, and all of a sudden I'm wearing 80 pounds worth of body armor every day, going into heavy vehicles, heavy doors, having to occasionally run. It definitely took its toll. So I do think that there's probably a lot more flexibility now that goes into making sure we're well-rounded. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see, what else we got on our bag of tricks here? You want to go with one?
Yes. So why do you think the Army took a test that didn't require any equipment and replaced it with one that requires a great deal of equipment? I think you guys both started when the APFT was in, and now, I think last, 3 years it's been in effect, the ACFT. What do you think the big changes are? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you wish you could go back to the old test? You used to be able to take it on deployments. Obviously now that's less likely because you need a whole complex of equipment.
I wish we would go back to the knee tucks. We spent a whole day out of a drill weekend building pull-up bars over at TCC, and then and I took the time because the first time I tried it, I couldn't do jack. I could not lift my body up. Didn't know what to do. Spent a few months working, grinding it, and then I could do 5 easily, no problems. After that, so. I think that goes to show, like, you start building the expectations and people are going to conform to it. But yeah, aside from that, I think that doing a PT test that it has this equipment, like we've all kind of said, it reflects, and you can take that and use it at a gym or use it in real life. Deadlifts reflect in your everyday life. How many times, think about it now. Now, after this, think every time you go and you pick something up off the ground, like, especially if it's something heavy, you're moving something, boxes, like, that's important. People don't learn that proper form or practice lifting heavy things that way. That's how injuries happen. So, I think that doing a PT test, I don't know why. I don't know the whys, or, like, Big Army, I don't ask questions, I just do. But, I think all of the equipment is, I think it's cool because then it gives units this equipment to do things like that, and you get to see real life transition. I think it encouraged a lot of people to go to the gym, and now they're familiar with this equipment. They translate it, and incorporating things other than, you're always going to have your body to work out with. You can do body weight workouts anytime, anyway. But to incorporate equipment, I think that's super cool. I think helps people get familiar with it. So.
No, I agree. I think it's just goes back to what we already covered. Of it's making more combat ready force. We have equipment overseas. You have to deal with it. Are you dragging a sled with 90 pounds on it? No. It's simulatory workouts for what you're going to be dealing with. So I do think that it's important. That it costs money. Yes. Does it take a little more time to set up? Yes, but it's more effective.
Okay, so you think that the benefit outweighs the strain, and the fact that, because the argument when it first came out is, now you've got to have deadlift weights, you got to have all the stuff that's sprint there carry, you've got all this stuff you've got to go, and if you were hypothetically deployed, that's the Connex now that you've got to bring with, that's going to get loaded and all that. Whereas before, you could be anywhere in the desert, jungle, whatever, and conduct a 2-mile run, as long as you had a level ground and that, push-ups, sit-ups required. No, to play devil's advocate, I would say it's more difficult now because you've got to have a lot more logistical thought applied to what you're going to do in terms of making sure that you've got the stuff to just test people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's the price you're willing to pay in physical fitness and a better lifestyle and a healthier lifestyle? You have to outweigh that, and Big Army did. They weighed it out, and I said we're willing to pay the price, both logistically and.
I mean, I guess the question is, because again, I came into it late. for junior troops now entering the force that don't know anything different, this is like what they expect. Do you think they will miss that? I mean, would they ever even make that assumption? You know, you're talking about people that you've made a very good point that, you know, you set the standard, people are going to go up to the standard. And if they don't, they're going to be gone. You know, that's the idea, right? And that's always kind of been the military anyway. But now that we have a standard that says you're going to need to deadlift, you're going to need to, like, these are all things, do you think that as we get further and further away from the old PT tests and the old guys that were doing that thing, it will matter? Like, you know, nobody will even think about this. It will just be, it'll be a thought that only the people like the old graybeards like me that are talking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's an issue for me, but I don't know if it's an issue for anybody else. You know, maybe not.
I don't think it is just coming in. Like
Sure.
you said, it's what they know. It's what they're
Sure.
initially being introduced to. Those of us that did the old, APFT, I don't necessarily miss it even. It's just, hey, this is
Yeah.
a standard, like you said, Army tells me to do it, so that's what I'm doing now. But like I said, I think it's more effective.
I think to answer your question in some aspects, like I came in when the ACFT was like just getting enlisted, so like I think I took the APFT once in RSP, and that was it, and never touched it again.
Yeah.
And then for the first almost 2 years of my career, I didn't even have to take an ACFT. Didn't have to take one in basic training, and we did, but we didn't have to pass it, which was crazy. Just like the crazy concept. And I think even that, like, it was the standard that was set. It was like, you're gonna have to meet this standard. Like, you have to be able to do this. At that point, they were still like trying to figure out what events we were doing and whatever. Like the leg tuck, I hated that thing so bad, and I practiced for months and months and months and months, and I felt like eventually I made some progress and I was able to do one, but by the time I got to fire school, they're like, oh yeah, you can do the plank now. Immediately did the plank.
Right.
I was like, yep, not gonna do anything. So I think it was really easy to conform to whatever that standard now was, versus having to continue. Like, now could I do a leg tuck? Probably not, because I haven't tried in forever.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it's a big issue for new people coming in. It's never
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I want to do push-ups and sit-ups and a 2 mile.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the standard and we're going to meet it.
I think it sucks to see because I think the leg tuck was very important. It tested your core, tested your strength of your core, which was good. But then the plank, super good. It tests your endurance of your core. Planks are good, and you need both. You need a strong core for a strong back, so you don't get injured. To be able to be strong, your core to be strong, super important. But then for your core to be able to be engaged for long periods of time, that's when your core can't do that, then that's when injuries happen. So I think that they both, like, the idea is to test your core strength in some way, but we kind of went from your just general strength to your endurance, which I think that they're both important. I think they both should be tested, but and then that kind of shows then again you're reflecting, you're going back and you're working on being able to do that leg tuck. So now you're building your core up, and the more you do that, you're going to see less injuries in the deadlift, especially if you're teaching the proper form of the deadlift.
That's right.
They kind of go hand in hand. So
I am going to go dive into another quick question. Okay, so again, old guy talking. All right, it felt like when we first came out with the diagnostic ACFT, there weren't alternate events. You know, there weren't. Like, my big grief was I couldn't run. You know, my knees were shot, I couldn't do the run, and so I didn't have to do a 2 mile run, but I still had to do the sprint drag carry. My argument was both involved running, so there wasn't an alternate event at that time. So I guess the question is, just from your perspective, having seen the evolution of what was before to what we have now, why did it take so long to think about those alternate events? I know that, you know, we're building the plane as we fly it type of thing, overused edge, but you know, I think there was a bit of that with the ACFT, but the ACFT that I see now is way different than when it first came out, you know, in terms of alternate events and everything else. The leg tuck, that was definitely controversial for a while. But I mean, you know, in being advocates for the ACFT, which I feel like you both are, and that's good. I'm playing devil's advocate for most of this. Why do you think it took a while? Like, what, you know, like nobody really thought about that at first, or I mean, this is an opinion-based question. I know you don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody was in that room. But just out of curiosity's sake, why do you think that took a while?
First, there's no such thing as a diagnostic. It's actually nowhere in the Army. Somebody made up that phrase and ran with it. As soon as you throw diagnostic in front of an APFT, ACFT, that tells soldiers right away, I don't have to try it.
I don't have to try it. I agree.
There is no such thing
yes.
as a diagnostic. It doesn't talk about a diagnostic anywhere in regulations. Someone came up with it as an excuse. So that's not a thing. But to answer your question, the alternate events, I think, again, opinion-based, I wasn't in the room. I think it was more coming up with ways of seeing the majority of different injuries that the Army has dealing with, and how can we still test them and get around those disabilities, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, of not being able to complete whatever the primary workout is. So why it took so long, I don't know. It's, 2025 now, so anybody could have Googled it and had
Who knows, yeah.
AI freaking teach them what alternate event is. But to put it in writing in a standard, I would imagine that's why it took more time. Of hey, this is the standard. If you can't meet it because of said injury, this is your other task, and these are the standards that you have to meet to complete that
Sure.
workout. So,
Yeah, that sounds.
I mean,
That sounds great.
I'm thinking about this though, that in conversations therapeutic sometimes, I feel like that the injuries that I wonder if, and again, I wasn't in the room either, but I wonder if a lot of the injuries that were coming out, you mentioned a good point, the injuries that were coming out of Desert Shield, well, not way back then, yeah, but Inherent Resolve, Iraq, Afghanistan, all those, right, where a lot of them were related to things that nobody had really foreseen before, and that the PT test that we had when I came in didn't prepare you for. The idea of having a lot of heavy weight and having to run or lift people out of dangerous situations and stuff like that, where a lot of physical strength was necessary, and your cardiovascular ability was based on the other. So I do wonder sometimes if a lot of these events really stem right at. I bet if I did the research, if we did the research and kind of dove into it, I just found it interesting that we started with a weird standard, and then everything kind of evolved from there. And I wasn't sure if it was because people were getting injured with the test, or if people were getting if it was just based on the fact that there was an aspirational thought as to what people could do, and that it was going to take a while. Whereas the people that are coming in right now know right off the bat, these are the standards that you're going to have to fit. Whereas the people that have been in for a while, and honestly, I don't know how many people were actually doing APFTs multiply,
and I have not heard of anybody being injured from the ACFT yet. So I don't think that that's why alternates were put in place. We've got combat-related situations, injuries you have to work around, but also just our everyday life. Jumping back to my first line leader again that had the ACL replacement. I mean, you have to have alternates for that. So.
Yeah. Nope, fastest runner I've ever seen in my career was 54 and doing marathons and actually placing, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He makes me feel underfit all the time, every time I think about him. But yes, and anyway. All right. Well, you know what? We've got one more question. And if you're okay, unless you've got one.
I do. So as far as ACFT, we're thinking Big Army. I think you guys have a lot of opinions about it. Specifically, let's say Dream ACFT. You get to plan the PT test. What would you keep? What would you get rid of? What would it look like? Would you add something? If so, what would it be?
I think I would change the run, but we discussed that. But if I was to get rid of something, I would say the standing power throw. I don't think that really. All that does is, as you get older, as you jump up and thrust back in a very unnatural movement, that you're going to tweak your back or something. And now that you've got an injury, I don't think that tests anything. I think it was just that one stupid thing where they're like, hey, we have to have it be ridiculous in some way, so let's throw this standing power throw and make up a workout. But that's what the one I'd get rid of. I don't think anything else I change. I think it's a pretty good measure. We already went over the run and kind of all the other workouts. I think those are good measurements. But yeah, standing power throws kind of ridiculously silly. So
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree completely on that one. I'm not a fan of that one. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And I really do think that if there's any injuries coming from the PT test, that is probably first in line.
it's the easiest one by far. It's the easiest workout. But if we're again building a combat ready force, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, and just that fast, aggressive movement. That's again where core workouts come. Is so important, and that's why. Again, I think that the leg tuck should come back. I really like that one. I know that one is so. I mean, but the one they came out with it was the one. One was the minimum, like, and then that again. I think that's where your units, MFTs, the soldiers that are good at it, come into play, is to helping out, helping people that are struggling with it to get into it. You're on drill weekend. Okay, guess what? Every hour you're going to go do pull-ups. Before you start the day off for drill, you're going to do pull-ups and then working into the leg test. Things like that. I think that you can set somebody up for that. Give them the tools to take home to take over the drill weekend, or out of the drill weekend into their home life to work on that. Because most people don't know. Most people just don't know. But then I am in full agreement with the run. I think a ruck would be amazing. I also hate running and I'm not good at it, which is why I should do more of it, sure, but when you want to reflect onto what we're trying to, the information we're trying to get out of this and the performance we're trying to set a standard for, I think that like a rock or rock run would be way more ideal. Outside of that, yeah.
All right. Well, we've exhausted all the questions I had. Do you have any other
I
questions?
don't. That was it.
Yeah?
Last one. Yep.
All right. Look, I want to thank you guys. That was a great discussion. Any closing comments? Anything else you want to say? You got the talking spin.
Yeah. Any other controversies that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about?
No. Is there something that we haven't talked about?
Thinking caps are really on, guys.
Yeah, I know. I see the Steve.
I think we covered most of my negative thoughts, I guess, on it.
Okay.
And positives. There's a lot. I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of good that comes out of it. And I'm not a stud ACFT taker. I'm not getting 600s or anything by any means. But I still agree with it. I still agree with their standards, and I'm kind of looking forward to see what they implement in 2025. It's looking like there's some things coming down the line for changes. However, we also need to get to a point where we stop making changes and not try to fix what isn't broken. I think once we get to a test, we stick with that test and we focus on other things that really matter. We implement a combat ready force test, a way to evaluate that, and we move on to the next, because you guys are going to have unlimited amount of podcasts if we go over all the issues in the Army. But there's other issues that we could put attention, money, and focus into.
Sure.
Yeah, because you're going to be best at what you train at. So if we're constantly changing the PT test, then it's going to take time to get people to that standard that they set. Just shifting gears and trying different things. So I think the one that we have, like I said, I think it reflects and carries out into people's everyday lives. I think to an extent, there's two things that people hate in this world: is the way things are and change. So I think that you're always going to have those issues, but I think that where we're at is much better than previous PT tests, and I think that there's some good changes that we can make. But for now, honestly, I think that we should focus on soldier care, making sure that our soldiers have the tools to carry out into their everyday lives. They're just make them better humans in general. I think that if you have a healthy, well-rounded human, then you're going to have a fantastic soldier. So,
Fair point. All right, well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you guys coming out.
Thanks for having us.
First podcast out there. Look, interested in your comments, your gripes, your things that we could have done better. Certainly interested in your comments. Please leave something below and let us know what you think. If you've got a topic that you'd like us to cover down the road, that's great. If you think we could do a better job at what we're doing right now, that's great. And certainly, if you want to come on and be guinea pigs and guests on this podcast in the future, hey, we're all game. Let us know. We'll definitely give you a ring. So just reach out.
Come yap.
What's that?
I said come yap.
Oh yeah.
Come, yeah.
Yeah. So in any event, next time we're going to be talking about women in the military. That'll be next month's topic. The goods, bads, the highs, the lows, the challenges that they face, the efforts that they're applying out there, and certainly that glass ceiling that they're trying to shatter in the military that we have right now, and the Cowboy Guard. So if you want to hear more about that, tune in next month. So in any event, in any event, hey, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. All right, bye.